Hey everyone, in today's video we're going to be checking out this Tamron 50-400mm f4.5-6.3 lens. We're going to be reviewing this lens for both photo and video. We have heaps to check out, so let's get into it. Yes, we could probably start here actually. Oh, I love this spot. I'm going to get down low so I can get some of those vines in the background. And I love, like, you can move around as much as you want and you can look away from the camera as well. Oh, I love that. That's cool. The Tamron 50-400mm is a full-frame Sony E-mount lens, and for today's review, I'm using it on the Sony A7IV. This is a zoom lens with an incredible amount of versatility, and while you're watching this video, make sure to switch the quality to 4K so you can see all the details. And then do you want to come back out into the sun as well? So like we've had like a bit of sunshine behind you, and if you can come just like out here a little. Yeah, perfect. This lens is so easy to use on location. Not only is it fairly lightweight for a lens of this focal range, but the autofocus is fast and accurate. I always ask my subjects to move around quite a lot while doing these lens tests, as it replicates real-world usage. I really believe a lens is only as good as the toughest conditions you put it through. So while we do start off with beautiful bright light for this photo shoot, the light was changing significantly throughout the day, so we have a lot of different lighting scenarios and camera settings to take a look at throughout today's review. I found the lens performed well regardless of what focal length I was at. In the picture-in-picture throughout the video, you can see the IAF is extremely sticky on Louisa. I'm sharing 100% crops of the straight out of camera images from the A7IV so you can see the quality of this lens. I also have my edited versions of the photos as well. I decided to edit this set of images with my disposable film Lightroom preset pack, which I'll leave linked in the description. I think the green, soft tones of this preset really suit the photo shoot and location. I'm just standing in one spot, but we're getting like so many different shots. Also, I always get bins in the backgrounds of my photos. It's so annoying. So I want to shoot like a photo where we have like a bit more of the street going down. So maybe if you stand just up here, and I'm going to try and hide the bins with you. Okay. But like, okay. And I'm gonna start zooming in a lot, so I'm gonna be like further and further away from you. I feel like a shot maybe with your arms resting like on your head would be cool here. Yeah, that's cool. And you know what? I can see the bins in the background, but we're just gonna roll with it. Yeah, there's nothing like there's so many. There's so many. I am very impressed with the image quality considering the focal range Tamron have squeezed into this lens. The images are sharp and crisp, and you can see plenty of details throughout all the focal lengths. I have a sample gallery on my blog, which you can download high-resolution JPEGs of images I took with this lens on a different day. The sample gallery images have more photos taken at lower ISO, so you can take a look at the quality of the lens for yourself. I did have to use quite a high ISO for today's photo shoot, as it was sunny and cloudy every few seconds. I needed to have a fast enough shutter speed so we didn't have lens shake from having the camera handheld or motion blur from Louisa moving around. Like I said, this does replicate real-world usage, as I can see this lens being used for sports or wildlife photography where you can't really tell your subjects to stay still. You want to stand just like here in front of this bush, and I'll shoot this way so we've got the light behind you. I don't want my ISO to be super high, so I'm going to lean against this building here to get a little bit of stability in my shots, because it is quite dark in this little alleyway. Wow, that looks so pretty there. The Tamron 50-400mm has a variable aperture of f4.5-6.3. I'm impressed that even with such a wide range of focal lengths, this lens is relatively small. It's about 184mm long with the external zoom barrel in at 50mm. It has a 67mm front filter thread and weighs about 1.1 kilos. This lens features a zoom ring and a focus ring. It has a focus hold button, a VC switch, and a custom mode switch. There is also a zoom lock switch to keep it locked in the closed position when storing. As with all the recent Tamron lenses I've reviewed, the firmware can be updated and custom buttons can be mapped with the USB USB-C port on the lens, which is weather sealed. I did notice there is a new function to program the focus limiter switch, which is cool to see and would be very handy. And then I think we should do like a sitting shot here as well because it looks so pretty. I'm gonna get right back again. Oh, I'm gonna see if I can get some of these leaves, this bush here in the foreground. And I'm gonna lean on my knee. There are a few lenses in this focal range that compete with the Tamron 50-400, including Tamron's own 150-500mm, which has a variable aperture of f5.5-6.3. If you don't need that extra 100mm in zoom range, you might find being able to go down to 50mm more handy and versatile. I also have a complete review of this lens as well, which I'll leave linked down below. In this range, we also have the more expensive Sony GM100-400 f4.5-5.6, where the Tamron has a wider wide end at 50mm versus 100mm. However, the Sony lens lets in more light at f5.6 versus 6.3 on the 400mm end. Finally, in this range, we have the Sony G200-600 f5.6-6.3, which I personally own. There's like kind of less bins here, a little bit. I want to try and get like a full body shot of you on the zoomed in end. So I'm going to go like running back. That's up to here. I can move back, but that's good for you though. We're going to see bins and we're going to see cars, but this is what we have to work with. Oh, that's perfect there. That looks so cool. If you want, you could do like a little pacing around. Yeah, that's so cool. I wish the sun would come back. I'm just at 135mm on this lens and I'm gonna get some headshots here. One thing to note is you can use the 1.4x or 2x Sony teleconverters with the Sony lenses. Tamron does not have their own teleconverters, and due to the design of the rear element of this lens, a teleconverter can't be used with this lens in particular anyway. So this is something to keep in mind if you may be after more reach down the line. Of course, all these lenses are in a bit of a different field since none of them can go as wide as the 50-400, which in itself is a big pro for this lens in my opinion. So who is this lens for? While I do have video tests to share with you later in this review, I see this lens being mostly used by photographers. I shared this lens on my Instagram stories and asked you what you want to know. The question I got asked the most is this lens good for wedding photography? And I can see why. At such a wide focal range, you might be able to get away with taking this one lens and maybe one other fast zoom or prime lens to capture an entire wedding day and keep your camera bag light. While I agree the focal range would be extremely handy for wedding photography or event photography in general, I think the aperture would get in the way of this lens being truly that versatile. The reality is that even outdoors in bright, natural sunlight like we had during this photo shoot, we took these photos at around 3 p.m. in the summertime, so the sun doesn't set until about 6:30 p.m. I still had to use some pretty high ISOs to be able to use a fast enough shutter speed to not cause motion blur and expose the images correctly in a fast-paced environment. For wedding photography, you are usually shooting in a variety of lighting conditions, from indoors to harsh sun to golden hour and night scenes, so fast lenses are a must for me personally to make sure I'm able to make the most of that particular lens and use it throughout all the lighting situations on a wedding day. I don't like to have lenses I can only use in one lighting condition. So if you're after a versatile zoom lens like this for wedding photography, you can consider the Tamron 35-150, which has a faster variable aperture of f2 to 2.8. I'll leave a link for my review of that lens in the description. That looks so cool there. Oh, I wonder if we'll be able to see like the rain. Otherwise, this lens would be a great fit for sports photography, which you would normally be doing in brighter lighting conditions, as well as travel, landscape, and wildlife photography. I think from all these example photos I've shared with you in this video, you can see this lens really shines when there is a lot of light. I had a mixed experience with the bokeh from this lens. In some photos, the bokeh is quite dirty and textured. In these shots of the water, the onion rings on the bokeh are very prominent. However, in other photos, the bokeh looks much cleaner. The bokeh is pretty round consistently throughout all the focal lengths. This lens has 9 aperture blades which are circular in design. I like the background creaminess, and even though we had an extremely busy location, the out of focus areas in the background blend together nicely. And even though we are limited to higher apertures, considering I normally do portrait photography at around f1.4, you are still able to achieve great background to foreground separation with this lens. This lens has a well-defined lens flare with lots of colors. It is more obvious on the wider end of the lens, and I personally would try to avoid this lens flare in my photography as it can be distracting in your images. The more you zoom in, the hazier the lens flare becomes, which I actually quite like what it looks like between 300 and 400 millimeters. It starts to produce ghosting at that distance as well, which I personally love using in my photography. From my personal experience and tests, there is very minor chromatic aberration. You can see faint purple fringing around Louisa's arm in these backlit shots here, and a small amount in the branches of these photos. However, I took many photos in lighting where CA typically pops up, such as the water and these backlit branches, and the images look very clean. I'm going to take a photo at each main focal length of this lens and put them all up on the screen for you side by side. And we're going to do this with Louisa and I just standing in the same spot to start with. So I'm going to start on the widest end, which is 50 millimeters. Then we have 135, so I have to start bumping up my ISO a little bit. And last but not least, we have 400, which is an extreme close-up. And the next thing I'm going to do is take a photo at each of the focal lengths again with Louisa standing in one spot, but I'm going to move around and frame each focal length to look the same. This time I'm going to start on the wide end because that's the trickiest one to frame.
You said wide end.
Oh, long end.
Long end.
Then 300. Now 200. While I think this lens will predominantly be used by photographers, I, as always, have video examples to share with you as well. Dan captured these video shots handheld on the Sony A7sIII, so we can take a look at the image stabilization. Just like photo, you can see strong performance in autofocus where it keeps track of the subject easily, even while moving towards and away from the lens. We also did extra tests, this time with the lens on a tripod, so we can take a better look at performance. I tested the autofocus of this lens at wide open 50mm, halfway at 200mm, and zoomed in at 400mm. You can see autofocus performance is consistent throughout all focal lengths. I'm laughing at this focusing test we did. Dan couldn't get his hand to cover enough of my face, so he himself had to jump in the frame so we can see the focus pulling of this lens. I also have the subject shift sensitivity set to the fastest. And finally, this lens has moderate focus breathing. That is all I have for today's review of the Tamron 50-400mm lens. Let me know what you think of the lens and of my review, the photos and videos down in the comments below. But as always, thank you so much for watching. I make new videos every single week, so I'll see you all next time. Bye!